from Brevard County, Florida, which is otherwise known as NASA headquarters, sort of. It's basically where we like launch all the rockets and everything. Really beautiful, wonderful area. I really like living there. And I have had the good fortune of meeting a really great group of Mercedes owners, and that number's always growing. And so I have the privilege of running an independent repair facility just for Mercedes-Benz. And we specialize in cars that are made right about the mid-90s and then going back into the early 50s. So the classics and modern classics are really where the bulk of our work and our interest is. My sister and I run the shop. I have a number of interns that I've trained over the past few years that are still active in the Mercedes community. And so we really try to contribute to education, both at National Mercedes Club events and to people at local section. I'm a member of the Central Florida section of Mercedes-Benz Club of America. I'm also the vice president of that section, apparently. I don't know how that happened, but it appeared in print one day. One day I heard from Ron Woodruff, and he's like, hey, would you be interested in coming out here? And it's like, I always knew people from Portland were a little crazy, but they're thinking of flying me all the way across the country. It was like, well, okay, great. So I was really excited about that. I didn't think that this would happen, but it did. And so when Alan contacted me and it started coming together, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm ecstatic, you know. The other thing I do is, and you guys might have read about this in the Star, but if not, I'll explain it a little bit better than Gary did. I run well, it's not really running, but I perform on-site service for people that are very interested in getting involved with their cars and getting a lot of work done in a short time. Is this necessarily a better service than your mechanic can provide? Not necessarily. If you have a really good mechanic who is really involved with you and you really like going to them, then that's the way to go. But there are those people across the country that either live in isolated places, or they don't like to wait, or they don't want to bring their car into a shop, or they want so much work done on their car that it actually is somewhat more affordable to bring somebody in to do all of it. I work with these people and we'll spend like a weekend or a week together, and we'll come up with a laundry list of things to do, and I'll go through and I'll sort their car out with them. And so that job is a very challenging job. It's very interesting, but so far we've had a really high success rate. We only had one episode that did not turn out properly. It involved a 240D with a broken piston ring. But we did eventually get it resolved. But the point being is that if any of you are interested in having, I didn't really come out here for this, but if any of you are interested in having my services in that way, feel free to talk to me. I don't expect anything from anyone. It's really a ridiculous idea, but it's highly effective. And for those of you that really want to be involved with the car that you're sorting out, or you have a laundry list of things to do, we try to make it effective, and we try to make sure that it's at about the same price bracket as it would be when you're taking it to your independent. The thing is that you learn more and it happens really quickly. But also at the same time, you know, most of you in this area, if you have a good independent that you're taking your car to, you know, a good independent is a good independent. You don't need to bring some guy in to take over his job. All right.
Who's running the show while you're here playing around?
No one.
What?
How many
guys do you have there?
That's just me and my sister.
Really?
Yeah, we're pretty small. I just do everything. I'll work weekends to get it all back on up. You know, they know that I like to leave.
So you just schedule and gone a few days and...
That's typically it. I haven't really gone anywhere for a long time, too. I think the last time in the summer I went out to Arizona for 3 days and sort out a 300D with
so
my
not like it's all because I've got him.
In the summer, it's once a month I go away for a week total, and I just basically we're all adults, or I bust my ass. The other 30 weeks. So see, it's really fun doing that because you have none of the pressures.
Yeah.
You know, one of my next jobs that I'm going to do actually is I'm flying out to Cincinnati to service a 1962 300D Cabriolet, which is really similar to even a four-door convertible. The car's been restored, but no one sorted it mechanically. So it's like this beautiful, unusable car.
So Pierre, are you going to call yourself the Flying Doctor?
No.
Okay.
No, it's more like the flying getting into it.
Well, do a story on that, just to kind of see what that turns out.
Well, Bill Walsh and I did one. On the 300D.
Yeah.
I could if Gary will accept it.
That'd be really cool, though. Yeah.
It's funny because this car is like won awards at all the major shows. It runs and drives. It just doesn't run and drive very well.
Yeah.
You know. But we'll see what happens. You know, a lot of the time, yes.
Well, I'm just thinking, that business model should work, because how much do you guys get outside work?
How much work?
Yeah.
We have a few. We
Yeah.
have customers that live in New Orange, Salem.
Yeah.
But there's, percentage-wise, you're probably talking between 5 and 10%.
If you're on I-5, 85% of the population in Oregon lives within 5 miles of I-5.
Right.
And once you get to Eugene, which is my hometown, you don't have a dealership going south. So
Right.
it seems like those kind of people.
Right. Well,
have need.
I agree with you. Our main clients, one of them is in Auburn, Maine, and another one is in Vail, Colorado. Just to name a few. But it does work pretty well. I did it mostly for fun because I like the challenge. But anyway, let's get back to pneumatic control. In Walt's case, this 220 SE Coupe. You want to look at your ignition system first. There are 3 big areas where everybody, including some of the best mechanics I've ever seen, really fall short with ignition stuff. So the first one is, where am I going? The first one, you end up with a little thing called a resistor. What it does is it knocks the voltage down the coil. These are all of varying levels of importance, but on some of the older cars that had basic ignition systems, points, coil, etc., you'll find like a mismatched resistor that goes with the coil. And this resistor's job is to limit the amount of voltage that is ultimately passing through the system. If you have too much voltage going through, you're going to burn up your points, and you're going to get a stumble in your rough idle, and eventually your car won't run. So the correct resistor for a pre-1970 car, which is a non-transistorized ignition car, a basic ignition car, is going to be a red 1.8 ohm unit, unless you have unless you're dealing with a car from like, I guess 1960 or earlier. Sometimes they have a gold 1.8 ohm unit. Then of course your coil, oh my gosh. So many problems with these cars. People will blame an injection system when they have like this 40-year-old coil that's been doing its job pretty well, but isn't supplying full voltage to the spark plugs. So any of you that have an older car, just because it runs doesn't mean the coil is perfect. It's probably not going to be supplying the amount of charge that it needs to the spark plugs. Case in point, that coil is from a 1956 300C W186 chassis, and it's one of those things where the car always ran. It's just we had a problem with spark plugs getting a little bit black even after we got the mixture right, and I was like, it doesn't make sense. Why do I have this old coil in here? I need to do something with that. Mercedes makes a new coil. It's not very expensive. Let's put it in. And sure enough, it really cleaned up the way the car ran. Do we have any questions about, okay, go for it.
I've read about other vehicles testing a coil that can
Yeah.
put out a lower voltage or a higher voltage.
Right.
And I read the way you test it is with the spark plug with a gap of 0.25, and you should get a crisp blue spark.
Yeah, that's a really nice method. I mean, it's a great home mechanics method to know if your coil's working or not. But this is the problem that we see a lot of the time too. And you mentioned cold and hot, right? Or did you not when you were talking?
No,
about
just how do you know if a coil is working?
Well,
I don't know. That's the only thing I've read.
This is the interesting part. there are what we call intermediate symptoms of coil failure. Like, my coil is kind of working, you know, my car starts and runs, obviously it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? But we'll find, especially on carbureted vehicles or vehicles with mechanical fuel injection, we've seen some instances where the coil just doesn't put out enough charge to supply the car with power in the higher RPM ranges. I think the best way to know if your coil is working properly, Bosch makes a coil tester. You know, some people have it, some don't. You could do a resistance test of your coil to check it. But really, to be perfectly frank, if you have a car with a 40-year-old coil on it, unless you really are looking for that extra point in the concourse, put a new coil on. Bosch makes them; they're available online for.
Now the blue ones are put out a little bit more.
The blue ones we're going to get into. They are a specific purpose. The replacement is actually a silver coil with a yellow lightning bolt. So ignition points are another area where I think a lot of people don't really, they don't think about them, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to go to electronic ignition because this looks like a much easier thing, you know. So before you start, before people start blaming their ignition system for things, you know, it's a good idea to make sure that your points are adjusted. A lot of us probably have had experience with cars, believe that we have to use a stroboscope and a dwell meter and stuff, and those are all really great tools, and you should use them if you have access to them. But if you are in a pinch, it is okay to gap your points with a feeler gauge. And typically on most Mercedes, other than the dual point distributors in the 300 SL, the 300 SE, and the 6.3 liter cars, you can gap your points to 0.35 millimeter, and the car will probably run adequately until you can take it to your mechanic or stick it on a dwell meter, you know, and get it to a point where it's finely tuned. I don't think I've used a dwell meter to set points in a long time, though, personally. And then your condenser, obviously, it's like the little, it's one of those things that almost never goes wrong, but if you have an old one, also another good thing to replace. A failing condenser will lead to a sort of a high-speed ignition breakup, or the car will just die for no reason out of the blue, and you'll look at your points and they'll be absolutely cooked. Explaining how a condenser works is a little bit weird, too. It's kind of hard to see the one in the picture. That's on a 1968 280 SEL. If I can find my laser pointer there. It's almost like a little storage tank for excess voltage. And then when the points close, it zap. You know, when the points of it zaps it back to the coil, and they close again. It's just like boom. So it's sort of like a depth charge. It fires off. It helps to fire off the coil using voltage that's left over. And you know, even though they don't really go bad that often on Mercedes, it's a good idea to check your cap and rotor too. It's another hard thing to see on this. This car actually has an old distributor cover on it, which is a nice touch. But checking a cap for pitting, carbon tracks, a broken center button. We've had so many people with 124 cars and 201 cars with 6-cylinder engines say, oh, my car just quit running. And we'll pull the cap off and the center button will be broken, you know, or they'll break it when they're installing the coil. So that's a really touchy, fine point on any distributor cap, the center button where the lead coil wire comes through. Let's see what else we have. Spark plug wire harness. How many of you guys with older cars, especially when you got the car, the plug wires were just laid everywhere all over the engine? So yeah, you know, especially having a 190 E2.6 everywhere, you know, people don't even take the time or bother with a good, correct set of plugs. What kind of plug wires? Mike, what kind of plug wires do you like to install on some of the older stuff?
They'll fit inside the loom.
Right, yeah, they will fit.
Some of them won't fit.
The gold standard for plug wires is either Bosch or Baru. The Mercedes Bosch sets are actually worth the extra money. I think it's like, what is the difference between like an off-the-shelf one from an auto parts store and Mercedes one? Like $80 to $100. They're even labeled, you know? So if you have a mess of plug wires laying all over your engine, or you acquire a car like that, that really opens up a lot of possibilities for an ignition miss or something like that. And when somebody's gone through that level of carelessness and they've laid the plug wires everywhere, you never know what else they've damaged. Let's see here. Okay, so pertaining to points, condenser, all that stuff, do we have any questions?
Yeah, our factory specification spark plug wire is always best.
Yes.
You know, these auto parts stores sell all these, make all these claims about this and that and the other thing.
Oh yeah, of course. If on all my cars, what do I use? Okay, because I have 108 cars, and I have a 108 car and a 111 car. You know, factory spec spark plug wires are generally, you can't go wrong with them on your Mercedes, but you do have some options. Like, we find that if you have an M103 motor, an M102 motor, the Baru sets are beautiful if you can find them. You know, they fit beautifully, they have a strong insulation. A lot of there are different levels of quality of Bosch products. Look at that nod. That's like the kind of nod you get from...
Bosch is not Bosch anymore like it used to be.
Right, exactly. It's like, yeah, unfortunately, it's true. So when there are some other brands out there too that are more niche brands. Like I've used Kingsbourne wires in the past, and they went downhill for a while. Now they're starting to get better, you know. The Kingsbournes with Baru ends on them are very good wires, and they fit really well, particularly on the older V8 cars.
They're all carbon inside instead of wire.
I'm trying to think about that. I think
the old Packard wire was.
It was a copper core wire, right? Yeah, and let me think here. I know that the modern plug wire is silicone now. They used to be copper, and copper is obviously the best, especially if you have an older car. Copper plug, copper wire.
I paid a fortune for a roll of Packard.
Yeah, and it's good stuff too, and then you buy the ends too.
Right.
In fact, especially like in your case, Ernie, and Walt's case, you can buy all of the equipment from Mercedes to make up your plug wires. It's just expensive and time consuming, but it's very rewarding when you're done. Ernie, did you make up a set of wires for your 300 SL?
Yeah, I changed all of them.
And what was were you happier with the end product?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I soldered the ends and.
Question for you
Yes.
is a lot over the years, and even up through more recent model years, Mercedes had non-resistor plugs.
We're about to get there.
And that's become a
Hot topic.
yeah.
That's why I got all the questions about the other stuff that I breezed through out of the way. Okay, so if you guys want to take notes, now's the time. Who has a gasoline car in here? Relevant material for everyone. Okay. If you have an M127, M129 engine, in some of our cases an M198 engine, you know, getting spark plugs isn't easy, even on an M130 engine. And you end up with all these different plugs out here, a Bosch WR7 DCP, or a Bosch W7 DC, or a W9, WR9 DC. What we're going to look at here is what kind of plugs you need to be using. The prescribed plug for all of the 6-cylinder engines up to 1967, that's 127, 129 and below, what is no longer available from Mercedes, but they've subbed it to what is called the W5 DCO, which is an especially low temperature plug. The problem is you get into some cars like the 300 SLs and the 300 SC and such, or a 220 SE that has a pretty rich mixture. And some of those cars now, you know, especially with the quality of fuel and city driving and such, you need a hotter plug. The W5 just won't cut it. The W5 is actually really only good if you're driving at reasonable speeds on a highway and not in city traffic. But it's a nice plug because it prevents a really lean mixture. So the step up is the W7 DCO. Any of you that are using your cars at low speed, you're not running them at 4,000 RPMs or better. They may not even get up to a really great operating temperature. And they were made before 1980, I'm going to say 1980 and earlier. You're going to want this guy, the W7 DCO. That is available as a Mercedes-Benz plug from your Mercedes-Benz dealership. It's not available anywhere else. For some reason, if you really hate dealing with Mercedes dealerships, and for some reason, I'm sure somebody like Mike, you walk in here, you ask for it, and he will get it for you. But if you really don't want to go through that trouble, and you really just want to go up the street to the auto parts store, you can also order an NGK BP6 ES. Notice that there are, we'll get to the W9 DCO in a second, but notice that in both of these designations, the letters R and P are absent. When you're dealing with spark plugs, R and P are evil if you have an older Mercedes. The P stands for platinum. Mercedes says in their service literature, for all of their engines with mechanical injection, K jetronic injection, KE jetronic injection, that you are not to use a platinum plug. Platinum plugs do not have the electrode size to withstand proper combustion in a high performance Mercedes engine. Have I seen them blow the tips off? Absolutely. Because you get this little tiny platinum tip, it's just like kaboom, gone. R is also bad. Why is R bad? Because R stands for resistor. A copper plug without a resistor is like this nice flowing open plug tip that voltage can just pass through freely. It's like bam, bam, bam. Think of a resistor as a bottleneck that voltage backs up. And when voltage backs up in a circuit, what do? You get heat. Heat is bad. Lots of heat is even worse. Then you start burning caps, you start damaging plug wires, you start getting ignition resistors that are getting too hot. You get coil breakdown, which is a big problem actually on cars like your 420 SEL. You know, you'll get all sorts of weird symptoms and your fuel economy will drop. Most shops install Bosch resistor plugs. Does that mean that all of you who have had your cars worked on by other shops should go out and check your plugs after this? Heck yeah! I promise you that about half the people in this room are running around with the wrong spark plugs in their cars. Now the W9 DCO is still a non-resistor plug. It is the hottest plug. You don't use a W9 DCO in an older engine before 1980 that's running right, you know, because your mixture just gets too lean and you invite valve issues and cylinder liner wear issues. But this is where the W9 DCO belongs. If you own like a 380 SL, a 500 SL, a 560 SEL, a 560 SEC, a 420 SEL, then that's the kind of plug you want. Now, I forgot to type it into my presentation, but I'm going to get into it in a second. There's also a non-resistor plug for the 102 and 103 engines. For the most part, you know, all of the 1981 and newer V8 cars will take a W9 DCO, and it's also a fantastic plug. The correct plug for a 102 engine. Where did I? Okay. Come on here. The correct plug for a 102 engine is called the H9 DCO. The H9 DCO is a 16 millimeter diameter head instead of a 21 millimeter head, so it will fit inside the spark plug threads of a you know, of a 102 or 103 engine. But that plug has limited availability on the market from Bosch. When we get them, they're still in Bosch boxes, but you're safe buying them through your Mercedes dealer, through your favorite mechanic, as long as they understand that that's what you want. There's also an HR9, an H9 DC Plus, all of that stuff, all of it's not correct for your car. So the H9 DCO is the current accepted plug for 102 and 103 engines. Yes, Rob?
Someone said once that the NGK plugs had a thread pitch problem on the line. Is that true or not?
I've never run into it before. I've been in a pinch where I've had to install NGK BP6ES plugs. To be perfectly honest, the only problem we find is that the NGK plugs aren't set to a gap. It's all wildly variable and you have to set it yourself. All of the Mercedes plugs come pre-gapped. You should still check your gap, but it's a good idea. On your BMW also, non-resistor is the way to go. All right, so you are the coil. You are my points. I am going to toss the ball to you. You're going to toss it back to me. I'm going to toss it to him. He's going to toss it back to me. I'm going to toss it back to you. Are we ready?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So, 2 bounces.
This is the electrical signal. I'm really bad at this.
You are?
I'm
We thought maybe you were
wildly unpoor. No, I'm not a professional tennis player. This is
quit your day
This
job.
is what happens when your resistors are bad. Okay, so let's say you're going to keep the ball, Mike. Let's say you've got a points issue. Ball stops, no more voltage. I'm not going to send anything to him because I have no signal. Okay, now back to me. Now, if I am bad, I retain the ball and I cannot send it to him. So there's no continuity. So basically, I just explained to you if the blue resistor shorts out, then I don't even have a ball. I have no power to play with. But I just explained to you the 3 things that go wrong with transistorized ignition. Either there's no ball, no power, or the points stop working and they stop signaling.
And they give you that.
Right. something bad. Or I get the signal back, but my switching function isn't working, so I can't send the ball to him. And that's that. Thank you guys. But anyway, and Alan, thank you for bringing the ball. You know, for the 2 of you that's relevant information for, does that make sense? Ron? Did that work? Did you understand that pretty well?
Now, how do you test TI control unit?
Oh,
that
goody.
maybe is
What a
bad?
great question. We're
You've
going
got
to
5
get...
of them and you want to find a good one.
We're going to get there really soon, okay? The transistorized ignition control unit is usually mounted in the front left fender. Here's how you know if it's working. Number 1, you have to hook it up. Number 2, your points have to work. Number 3, when it switches, you are supposed to get a reasonable amount of amperage to your coil. Okay, you're looking for amperage. I think it was like, I don't think it was 9 amps, but I can't remember. I think 9 is a little bit strong. I think it was 0.9. But you're looking for amperage to your coil. If you're getting amperage to the ignition coil, then it's working. It's 75. It's actually going to be mounted underneath the frame rail, and it's going to have a separate wiring harness attached to it. Let's see here. Okay, resistors. These obviously are old resistors. The 0.6 ohm resistor and the 0.4 ohm resistor. We talked earlier about a 1.8 ohm resistor for the coil on older systems. Now these cars with transistorized ignition controls have a 0.6 ohm resistor protecting the coil. 450 SLs and similar cars, 280 SEs and SELs, retained this setup from all the way till 1982. So they still had the twin resistors. resistor number 1, our silver band, is a 0.6 ohm, and if it's 30 years old, you should think about replacing it. They crumble and turn to nothing because they are subjected to so much heat. Backing up all that voltage makes it really hot. The 0.4 ohm resistor, which is the blue guy right here, protects your transistorized ignition control unit or your electronic ignition control unit. It reduces the amount of voltage going to it, so it does not cook. So these are both very good to replace. Often the internal windings will fuse together, you'll get too much voltage, and then something will go kaboom. Let's see here. Points. Now that the ignition points have a reduced load, all their job is now that is to act as a signaling device. Blue coils. We already talking about blue coils. Who mentioned something about blue coils? Yes. Okay. The blue coil is traditionally used for transistorized ignition.
There are 2 types though.
Yeah, there are. There's an early blue coil. There's one for the early cars, right?
Yeah, the 1, 2, 3 will fry system if you put the transistor.
Right. Exactly. Fortunately, the new transistorized coil is not blue. It's got a red stripe and it says transistor on it. So they got a little bit smarter. But the coil that he's talking about is actually a factory Bosch replacement part that you get. I'm trying to think, what's it for? The twin coils of the 300 SL?
No, actually, like a 190 SL or an N hour.
Right.
Recommend.
That's interesting because when we did a coil of that at an hour, we ended up with the silver thing from Bosch, which is VIN number matched. You know, hopefully, I don't think it's having any problems. But the new condenser has a little pigtail that goes down to a junction block. It's a green wire. That green wire is the signaling wire. That's the communications between the trigger points and the transistorized control unit. So if your condenser gets damaged, you can interrupt that signal. As a side note, 4.5 liter cars, if you ask for a condenser now, you won't get one. They just went to a green wire that went right down to the junction block. So 4.5 liter cars now do not have an actual condenser anymore. Yep, that applies to your car.
For what year?
72 to 75. You see a lot of those cars where you pop the cap off and the condenser actually has like a cut wire on it. And a lot of the time it's like, whoa, what's going on here? You know? And yeah, not it. You know, they don't use it. All right, so from 72 to 75, they improved the transistorized control unit. If you have a 71 and 72 model year car, kind of like you do, Ron, you can actually, if you get all the wiring, you can install the later control unit. Because the original board in the early control unit was made of germanium, and germanium is somewhat more reactive. They switched later on to a silicone unit, and it is less reactive and less likely to deteriorate over time. However, silicone and germanium are both if you look at all varieties of transistors, earlier ones used germanium, and then when silicone became more widely available, a lot of them switched over. So in halfway through 72, Mercedes started doing that. And it's a nice modification, but you have to have the wiring harness. The difference between the old unit and the new unit is that the old one has a little boot with a 3-pole plug. And then these later guys have they have a single pole. They have a 4-prong plug here that extends outward. Let's see here. Germanium-based board. We covered this. It's gone. Still need on the 6-cylinder cars. All right. So in 76 and 77, Mercedes adopted a system without points. This is the electronic ignition. Who had a car newer than 1975? Here? Okay, great. Beautiful. A gasoline car. So we're building up to the EZL system and the crankshaft position sensor and stuff. But this came before. So the 6.9 was the first. The 6.9 liter cars, the 4.5 liter cars were the first ones to get this system. It still has the blue and white resistors, but now it has a wire that goes into the distributor that takes a signal. It basically identifies the position of the distributor, and it goes to the control unit. Okay, time to fire number 1, time to fire number 2, time to fire number 3. Now you still have a cap and rotor, but this position sensor is letting the electronic ignition control unit know when to tell the coil to fire. Does that make sense? I guess not. Okay, we're going to start again. Gentlemen, come on.
Can I be the coil?
Actually, I think that I need a distributor now. I don't need points. No, now we have a Hall effect sensor.
Yeah, we have a little signal.
Okay. Who wants to be? I guess I'm going to be the ignition control unit again.
Okay.
You can be the Hall effect sensor. You can be. Let me think here. You could be the coil, and then you can be the distributor, right? All right. So this is the electrical signal. All my resistors are working, so I have an electrical signal. The first thing is I am going to check Mike and make sure that Mike is in position.
I'm here.
All right, I have just received a signal back from the distributor. It is time to fire.
We received a signal back from all of
I received a signal back. Right, it is a distributor. But it's a different, now hang on, it's a different part of the distributor. We're talking about two entirely different parts. So the Hall effect sensor is in the distributor, but it's not the part that goes zap, zap, zap. It's the position identifier. So we'll go through that again. So Hall effect sensor, back to me. I now have a signal to work with. Now I get to tell the coil that it's time to fire. All right. Now it doesn't go back to me. No. It goes to Ryan. Now Ryan gets to activate the spark plugs.
Oh, who are they?
Okay, back to me. All right, so the demonstration, Hall effect sensor, transistor, electronic ignition control unit, 2 coil, 2 distributor cap. Hall effect sensor, ignition control unit, coil, distributor. Thank you, gentlemen.
We need the spark plug.
Okay, so did we understand that pretty well? This is actually really fun. Oh my god. All right, so if you have a 201 car, right from the get-go, the 201 actually had the last edition of that system in 84 and 85. In 86, Mercedes switched over to, let's see here, where are we? Coil distributor. That's what the distributor with the Hall effect sensor looks like. It's got those spider legs in it. And let me see here, spark plugs. Okay, easy up. So in 86, all across the board, Mercedes went to this lovely contraption. And what they ended up going to was a distributor that was just dead simple. No vacuum advance, no feeler wire, nothing. So you guys are probably asking, well, how do we know when to fire? You know, and how do we know when we need a vacuum advance? And how do we know these other things? Well, that's the beauty of it. So this plug on the EZL goes to a crankshaft position sensor. I'm sure you guys have heard the term. What the crankshaft position sensor is a magnetic pickup, and it tells the EZL where we are, what position the crankshaft is in. because that's when it knows when to fire, you know. Then we've got this guy. This is a vacuum port that takes over the vacuum advance. This guy this guy has a liaison. I think this is in and this is out. That's signal going out directly to the ignition coil, and it fires the coil accordingly based on how much vacuum we have and what the position of our crankshaft is, and spark is distributed. So if you have an 86 or newer car, if you have an ignition problem, if you have like a little stumble or a hiccup, you probably have a bad coil. But if you have a situation where the car is just dying and it won't restart, or it almost restarts after a long period of cool down, you either have a problem with your crankshaft position sensor, which lives in the bell housing of the transmission, or you have a problem with your EZL. These guys, however, rarely go bad. How many of these have you guys had to replace over time?
More V8s than 6 months.
Right, more probably.
I don't know, 4 or 5.
Yeah, so it's not a part that goes bad often. You take your car to a shop and the first thing they blame is the EZL, and they go, you need to spend $1,600. Usually that's not the case. It happens sometimes, but yeah.
Question, I had a 93 500E.
Yes.
And all the 500E guys used to complain about how expensive the EZLs are.
Uh-huh.
Some of them, you know, some guys run their cars up over 200,000 miles. Can those be rebuilt, or do you have to buy a new one?
Sealed unit, not even Beckman will touch it. Yes.
I've seen 2 different ways of putting the heatsink compound on those.
Uh-huh.
One of them had the heatsink compound, and then there's a plastic membrane that bolts
Yeah.
onto the fender. The other one was that membrane was gone, and it was directly on the fender between the EZL unit and the grease. Which is the right way?
Plastic membrane.
Plastic membrane.
Day one, they all had a plastic membrane.
Okay.
That is the way to do it. This, you could barely see it. You could just see a little bit of white stuff on the edges, and what we have identified is the heat sink on the back of it to keep it from
Overheated.
Right, overheating and to dissipate heat. It's actually this white powdery stuff. It's really disgusting.
Yes.
But if you have a 124 car or 126 car and you see that stuff's deteriorating,
You can get it at Radio Shack.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Go to Radio Shack and get more heat sink compound. It will protect your car. And a lot of people think that the reason they would go bad in the V8s more often is because they were in a more vulnerable area. The stuff would just go away, crumble. The EZL would overheat, and then you've got a problem. No ignition, you know.
I've also had a problem with the crankshaft position sensor.
Oh, what did yours do?
When it got hot, and of course you know where it quit.
Yeah.
Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But it would cool off and it would run. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's generally what will happen. You'll get a no start condition, and you'll have no ignition spark at all if you have a bad crank position sensor. Then you let the car cool down, it starts and runs mysteriously well. Okay, all of them. That's good. Those will work. About the equivalent of the W8. We're going to do that adjustment now. Thanks. You are so nice. You guys are like the best. Freaking sending everybody who calls me out of the Northwest up here. And be like, I met these people that actually give a damn about older Mercedes. Ooh. Good grip, Ron.
What's that?
You have a good grip.
Well, I try not to do it too tight.
That's one of the things Snap-on has.
I don't know about that.
Maybe number 5 is bad too.
No, that's not a lean plug. No, that's like a just right plug. What's the car doing, Ron?
Well, it wants to backfire when I'm just on the road, just surge now and then, just pop, pop, you know, that sort of thing.
Backfire and surge. Pop.
Well, it's mostly the pop, pop.
How's your linkage? Let's find out.
You know, hold the light for you.
I do. I'll probably drive it actually. Does it do it cold?
Sometimes.
How's your ignition timing?
As far as I know, it's okay.
Is it when you take off the car, take off the throttle, that it pops?
No, it's when I'm just cruising.
It's when you're just cruising that it pops. Okay. That is a really good question. All right.
And this solved the whole problem. It starts all the time, every time. And I got 20% more increase in power with this and the resistor. It's a rocket ship now.
I don't think the transistorized control unit was necessarily the problem.
Really?
To begin with. No, I think it was somewhere else.
It looks like that ball has been changed, although
Kind of nice
it
white
came
wheels.
off that.
Yeah, someone pulled this.
Oh,
Yeah.
didn't you do the wheel?
Why is it that I always pick that one?
Well, it's a logical one to take off.
Yeah, it is, exactly. Everybody here has probably felt that way.
There you go.
Finally.
Come off by itself.
Was it an adjustment?
No, it just was being mean to me. Huh, let's look here. I wonder if you're staying open. Alright, I'm going to do this the other way. Ron, do me a favor, buddy. Start the car, okay? This Ron's thing. Oh my gosh, you got some oil coming up here also.
Oh yeah, this one's leaking really bad. That one over there's not too bad.
That's the passenger driver's side that you really have to check. Grab that.
Yep.
Yeah, he's got a replacement distributor. Yeah, that's a replacement unit. It's holding pressure.
And I started to get many.
Standing diaphragm. How does the car actually run when it's warm?
Well, it runs pretty good. If I'm in stop and go traffic, it'll start. Then I'll start to hesitate when you accelerate. So it's got like
It's not leaking fuel down, so that's good. Your distributor's okay.
okay.
Warm up regulator. What's your story, Mr. Warm up regulator? I bet you're original. What do you think? Does it look original to you? I can't.
I don't remember seeing it.
I have.
Really?
Yeah, but
With the corrosion stuff on it, yeah.
Oh God, I know. I banged my head on the bottom of this thing.
I mean, they always come back
1,000
just like that when we send them out cold.
Right.
What is that?
it's got fuel or oil or something
On the
here.
outside.
Is that gas? I can't smell it. No, my nose. It is gas. Hey, why don't you start the car?
Sure.
I should keep my watch your hand, buddy.
It's wet there, and I also noticed that or is it right in there?
Hang on. Well, look at that. He has new injectors. All of them? Yeah, all of them are new. Look at that. And it's got a new cold start injector. Look at how nice that thing is. You've got all brand new injectors.
Oh, that's old, man.
Is it?
That's an old one. That's your leg?
Yeah.
That's old.
They look so shiny and nice.
Wet.
Yeah, and we haven't drugged the link.
Yeah, I'm gonna fire.
Maybe not.
But
Maybe
see,
not.
that one's new. A couple over here, that one's new.
Okay,
that
so they
one's
did some of your injectors.
They did like one bank.
Yeah, that's weird.
That is weird.
And that can throw it up. We've had that too.
Yeah.
You either do none or all.
Okay, so they didn't do all.
Go ahead and start it though. I want to see it run.
Anybody's tag. Well, it looks nice.
just oil residue.
Is that what's in there?
Yeah.
History? Who owned it?
I know the name of the couple that drove the train.
Dustin?
No, their name was.
It looks like it's got a new accumulator too.
Well, I know it's got a new filter because I just put it in last week.
The Dustin family that owns the spaghetti factory, they had a couple of these that were silver with red leather.
Dustin.
That's
How do you spell that?
It's like D-U-S-S.
Oh no, this car is so clean. It is a super clean car. Look at those old hoses. You know what you should do?
What's that?
Where is he?
Over here.
You should replace the fuel hose coming out of the tank
Okay.
and this cross piece right here.
Okay, because I'm getting a gas smell in the trunk.
Yeah, that's going to be part of it right there. This thing is so cracked and broken.
Okay.
You know, this fuel accumulator looks pretty new, but I would be suspicious about it.
Okay.
First of all, those 4 injectors that weren't done need to go.
Okay.
Second of all, how long does it take to start? How many seconds of cranking?
Oh, sometimes it'll start to fire after about 4 seconds, and then it won't catch, and then I'll have to do it again. Then
How
eventually-
far down are you putting your foot on the floor?
Not at all.
Depress it halfway,
Okay.
and that'll probably help it.
Okay.
Just so you guys know, there was a technical service bulletin about starting these things. If you have a mod starting problem, try depressing the accelerator halfway. Usually it'll clear it right up.
I thought on fuel injection it didn't really matter.
No, halfway. I bet it'll start in 2 or 3 seconds.
Electronic fuel injection
This is purely mechanical.
Wow, there's a lot of drive belts on this.
Really?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I know. I mean,
Yeah, with the new 128 radius. What are the
I know.
I don't like those, but I don't know. This is my 3.5.
Oh, nice.
Curious. Yeah, it's quite pubbly. That's why I couldn't walk away from it. I was like, you're going to be a heap of trouble. My 3.5 too. I bought it needing so much work.
Have you painted it?
No, that's how I bought it. It was painted in '94.
Yeah. Well, I hear a little welt, but
100 bucks says he's got something going on with that chain guy.
I think there's something happening that side.
I can hear it.
Do you have a stethoscope?
Listen.
Yeah, he does.
Listen to it really good. You can hear something in there.
Kind of a
Yeah. It's like the chain is walking.
You got your stethoscope there? The
Best
doctor.
tool in the world.
Doctor's in.
It sounds more rhythmic when you get the stethoscope like lifted.
This is worse than the train, huh? I don't know.
Yeah, you get to some of the, oh, you can hear the belt on it, just transmits the railroad.
That is a nice looking car. I can't hear it.
That's what I said. It goes weird. It goes from what you were describing as kind of a
Right.
to a tick, like you're hearing each lifter.
What the heck is going on here?
When you got one belt that's a bit stretched out.
And I could hear the belt going right through the stethoscope.
That's really bizarre. They put dual belts on the power steering.
And water pump.
V8's had old 450s.
The turbo diesel 300Ds had double belts and the water pump and alternator, which is a great idea.
Yeah, because before that we had little 9.5 sucker.
So should I take it to California and back, or should I do something to it?
This heck is a roll. But we might want to pull that valve cover and just, if you're hearing some, I sure.
In the morning it ticks.
I mean,
How long? Like
Well,
right when you start it?
Yeah.
And then it goes away after a second?
Probably. Well, then there's noise and music and stuff. So. But it.
Hey, that's like
I would, a tensioner is a $200, what is it, $250, a $250 insurance policy.
especially if we need to look to make sure we didn't wind the chain. If we were
We put a new
about the
chain
mile,
and guides. I think we put a new.
wound the chain.
All right.
Yeah, you never know.
That's why.
It is, it's really
Lifters
nice.
are no, that thing is dry. It's a really good old car.
That's why I like these so
I
much.
know. And they're underappreciated. They're cheap to buy.
they're balanced so well.
Yeah, I know, for a V8, imagine, it actually idles smoother than a mechanically injected
When
six-cylinder.
they were new, I remember driving brand new and saying, no man, they will never make a better driving car than it. I mean, I just thought the 420 was just, because it didn't have the rumble of the 560. They
Yeah.
were just silent going down the road. I just thought,
The original Becker radio,